Good evening, and God bless all of you. I'm Alan Rule. I'm joined by William Albrecht, elite debater William Albrecht, who has just debated a top Eastern Orthodox apologist, Father Ramsey, on the topic of purgatory, a very important subject. And he actually I can't remember how long this was ago, but when you debated Dr. Michael Brown on purgatory. So yes, he's
maybe a year. I'm trying to remember. Could be
yeah,
a year.
between a year and 2 years. I remember it was during lockdown. You have he's debated Eastern Orthodox, Protestant. I guess all you need now is an Oriental to debate. Perhaps maybe you and Subdeacon Daniel Kakish can debate or something. But this guy knows purgatory. And there's
really is a topic I love talking about.
Yeah, it's a good topic, and there's a link to the debate in the description. So if you want to go see it, at least I think I put the link there. Anyway, if I didn't, I'll put it later. But and so you did say something, William. You said this is a topic that you enjoy. Just elaborate on that a bit.
Yeah, Alan, when I first became Catholic, one of the issues I had a big problem with was purgatory. And I did a lot of homework many years back in preparing for, once I became Catholic, in preparing for an apologetic reply to those that were contesting purgatory. And it got to the point where I realized, okay, there's not a whole lot of good material online about purgatory. And I remain steadfast in my opinion on that today. You can Google stuff. You'll go to various different websites. And in my opinion, Alan, a lot of the quotes are taken out of context. Maybe they're not even talking about purgatory. And it really bothered me way back when. So I undertook a task to really do a whole lot of homework on the topic of purgatory. And it resulted in me writing a lot about it, compiling a lot of notes on it. And I've been writing and researching purgatory for a very long time now. Every now and then, I stumble upon something new. And for this debate, I stumbled upon something I had not found before. And that was a quote from St. Maximus the Confessor, who I know the Orthodox, they love him. They love him. So I stumbled upon that quote, went to verify it in the Patrologia, and just really, it's a knockout quote. The Orthodox, if they want to deny purgatory, which I know not all of them do, they've got a big deal that they're going to have to deal with, not only with St. Maximus, but with the overwhelming consensus of the Greek fathers.
Yeah, no, and like to be honest, I hadn't heard the quote from St. Maximus before. I'm familiar with other quotes from the Greek fathers, but I've not heard the St. Maximus, and I've actually read quite a bit of St. Maximus. So, I mean, I'm shocked I didn't come across that. But what's that from? Like, what part of his writings?
Some questions and doubts. So it was a work that I had not really read much of before. And really, the way that I stumbled upon it and the way we do a lot of work together, myself and Father Coppes, a lot of the times we'll go into the TLG, which is the Thesaurus Linguae Grece, or we will go into various other databases of the original languages that we have at our fingertips of the Church Fathers. And maybe we'll plug in a word for purification or purging, something along those lines. And every hit we get, we'll then begin to read it, see if we find anything interesting, and then we'll read the whole thing in context. And I want to give a shout out to Father Coppes because I found something else, and I'm still not 100% convinced by him. We'll talk about it later, but I found another work from a very prominent Eastern figure. I won't say it right now because we have not fully translated it yet, that I thought was purgatory. I found Maximus, and in the end, Father Coppes and myself do a lot of work together. Father Coppes said, you're going to have to scrap the other one. That's not purgatory. But he did tell me, he said, but with St. Maximus, wow, I had not read that one before, he told me. So that was a good find. And Alan, I have to say, I'm very pleased with the way the debate went. I think it went well enough to say that if anybody was on the fence with choosing Orthodoxy or Catholicism before, I think this should really show you that when it comes to Orthodoxy, we invite our Orthodox brothers and sisters to return to the fullness of the faith, because really, as you see in the history of the Bible and their own church fathers, the ones we share in common, they taught purgatory. That's very clear.
Yeah, and I'm curious. You talked about that quote that you're in the midst of translating. That you said you're not going to say who it's from. Is that the quote you texted me like last week? I won't say who it's from.
There you go. You remember it. Yeah. Alan, for people that may not know him, I toss stuff off of Alan very often. And I'm still, and I tell Alan, I am still personally, I think it's a purgatorial quote. But maybe I'll do a little bit more digging, and maybe I'll eventually come to the conclusion it isn't. And I don't think Father Kopp is meant to shoot it down in the sense of, no, it can't be purgatorial at all. But I think he realizes it requires a lot of work to unpack it. And my goal is not to waste all of my time in cross-examination, because I know the time just really flies, Alan.
Yeah, and I think you had stuff that was hands down about purgatory, no question, by St. Maximus, St. John Chrysostom. You threw out a few extra quotes. There's that one quote that everyone's familiar with that it kind of odd. It could go either way, but then you had some supplemental quotes on that verse, and it clearly teaches purgatory.
Yeah, I agree with you. I really do. And even the one where the one thing that I'm going to grant is that from everything that I've looked at when it comes to St. John Chrysostom and all the other fathers that provide an exegesis of 1 Corinthians 3, I find St. John Chrysostom's to be perhaps the oddest one. But as odd as it may be, there's still purgatory in there. Because even though his interpretation of the wood, hay, and straw, the section of 1 Corinthians 3, 10 to 17, even if that one was a novelty, is novel, because I don't find it in any other fathers. Either which way, you have a section of that very work where he talks about the man passing through the fire with golden armor and coming through the other side even shinier. Now, that kind of imagery would not be used for somebody that would remain in fire, perpetually being punished. So I don't think that's a good reading from Father Ramsey. I've looked at what the scholars have to say, and I think that they're squarely against him. But even if I were to grant him them, I quoted many other areas where Chrysostom very clearly talks about purgatory, and there was no rebuttal. There was no rebuttal there.
Yeah, no, and I think, like, in terms of Father Patrick, he's probably one of the top Eastern Orthodox intellectuals out there that engages in debate. That is especially with Catholics. I know he debated Gavin Ortland on something, but like I think that that was not his best showing. In fact, that is. I have to say, like, I'm not trying to knock Patrick. I don't know him personally, but he sounds like a very nice guy. Yeah, that was probably the worst performance I've ever seen out of him. I mean, sorry.
Yeah, no worries at all. I think the one thing that I noted there, Alan, and I noticed was, number one, Father Patrick very clearly, you could tell from the beginning, he had prepared his opening statement. He had prepared cross-examination. The problem that I think he may have encountered was, really did sound a lot to me like he was coming at it from a Protestant perspective. Yeah. I have no idea why.
I have that written down.
And Alan, I was thinking, okay, well, I did not expect that, and I didn't think that. First off, I don't think they're good arguments when it comes to arguing against purgatory from the Protestant perspective, Alan. I don't find it there. Mango, thank you very much. Very, very humble at your comments. Very, very humble. Thank you so much. As people know, I pour a lot of time of prep into my debates, and I learn my opponent's position even beforehand. I told Father Ramsey, you recommend as many books to me as you want to recommend, and I will devour them. I'm going to read them all. And so what he did to me, he recommended some stuff to me, and he wrote out a massive, not too massive, a big explanation of what purgatory is from his perspective. So I told him, okay, we're going to debate within these parameters, and I allowed him to even hammer out the thesis. There's only one word I changed. When he had originally put gain paradise. Now I know we can utilize it in an Orthodox manner, but attain sounds a whole lot better according to Catholic teaching. So really, other than that, he's the one that laid it out. So I stuck within that thesis and within that narrow thesis of his, because we work out the thesis with Matt Fradd's assistant and all. We talk mutually, we connect, and once we have the thesis, we contact Matt, Pipes of Aquinas, and they hammer it out, and we are good to go. They make sure. So it's nothing, no sleight of hand or no trickery. And I stuck within that thesis. And I think if you judge the debate by that thesis, I think I held to the thesis, and I don't think he did.
This question may seem off topic, but it's actually somewhat tangentially related. Do you know what jurisdiction he's under?
I am not sure. Yeah, I'm not sure. That's a good question. I have never asked him.
I'm just asking that because I wonder, he probably knows the Greek language, right?
No doubt. He has translated a lot of stuff from the Greek to English. He is a Greek scholar, so he knows Greek. He was taught and trained by the late Metropolitan Callistus Wary is the one that taught and trained him. So he got his doctorate under. He's one of the top when it comes to Orthodoxy. So I don't like hearing this garbage. Well, Father Patrick, it's not good. You don't hear anybody that knows Orthodoxy saying that. He's one of their top scholars. He is very well learned. He's very well versed. He's one of their top guys, and he will debate the topics. So I appreciate that from him.
Well, I have not encountered him personally. Like the closest I came was about a year ago. I was on Swan Sona's channel. It was supposed to be Eric and Elijah and Michael Lofton, but for some reason Michael Lofton and Elijah couldn't make it, so I had to fill in for both of them. I had mighty big shoes to fill, and like we were dealing with two scholars' works against the papacy. One was Father Patrick, and can't remember the second one. I want to say Perry Robinson, but I don't think it was him.
It could have been.
Maybe I'd have to go see it, but
I would. Of course, I would. I would debate anybody that I think knows about the topic. But yeah, of course, I would debate Deacon Ananias. There's no doubt about it.
Okay, I'm just going to give my impression I got throughout the debate from start to finish. Let's take a couple minutes. Okay, you gave your opening first, and I thought, that's expected. And then it gets to Father Patrick, and I thought he would do something like he had done in his debate with Eric Ibarra, his debate with Gavin Ortland, his other debate against you on the doctrines of the Virgin Mary. I thought he'd explain his position, talk about the text, the important texts that need to be talked about, like Second Maccabees, First Corinthians, and then possibly go into the Greek, throw in some church fathers stuff. I thought that was going to be the thing, but it's like he preached a sermon, and it felt like a Protestant sermon, like he was using some of James White's arguments in there.
I heard that,
So I mean, in terms of openings, perhaps he was going for a strategy instead of making a positive case for his position. He was just going to spend all his time attacking the Catholic position. I'm like, I'm not a fan of that, but maybe he's going for that.
Yeah.
But then it comes to the cross X, and it was at the end of the second cross X. That was his cross X of you.
Right.
And you brought up 1 Corinthians 3 in one of your responses. And he's like, wow, that's not a text for your side. It's a disputed text at best. And then I'm like, I'm thinking, how come he didn't take, I can't remember how long the opening statements, 10 or 15?
15.
I don't know why he didn't take 3 minutes, go to 1 Corinthians 3, because he knows that's going to be quoted. I don't know why he does not just go there and take some time, go through the Greek, go through the context, throw some church fathers in there maybe who talk about it, who support his position. Why didn't he do that?
Yeah.
And then, because as soon as it came for cross-examination, he didn't have any ammo in that to throw it at you. And I think by the end of the cross-ex, the debate was already won. That's
Yeah.
just my opinion. I'll let you.
Yeah, I tend to agree when I think and I want to be as nice as I can to Father Patrick, but I think that once I went right directly to the Confession of Dositheus, and I think once we go to that Pan-Orthodox Council and we read the language, and he's forced to deny the language of a Pan-Orthodox Council, I think that right away shows that it's a big problem for him and for Orthodoxy. Now I know we can easily say, well, there are some Orthodox that affirm it, what have you. You know what? We're essentially utilizing the same language. We should be saying that we are, but I went over it over and over with Father Ramsey, and I've gone over the language with multiple other scholars, and they will tell me at the end of the day, the Orthodox scholars will say, no, we don't agree with you because we disagree with the suffering aspect of it or the punishment aspect of it. And I can't wrap my head around that, Alan, because even Mark of Ephesus believed there was suffering there. And all of the great saints that talk about it believe there's a kind of suffering. So I really, right away, the one thing that comes to my mind, Alan, much like the Immaculate Conception debate, much like I see today, modern day Orthodoxy continues to move further away from their ancient fathers or their ancient great figures, such as Mark of Ephesus. And that is problematic for them.
Well, I think like you have like the church of the medieval period, you got Ptolemus, you got Mark of Ephesus, and then they start responding to Protestants, because although the Protestantism starts in the West, it eventually moved east, sent people trying to convert them, and then they basically give the same answers the Catholics gave on all these key issues. And starting in the 20th century, you have pushback against that, but they think they're pushing back on Catholic influence, but they're actually pushing back against their own tradition, because those are things we share in common. And so they're trying to cut their nose off to spite their face, if that makes sense.
It really does. It does completely.
So and like, of course, there's accusations like, well, a lot of Greek scholars were going to universities in France and Germany and Italy, so it kind of rubbed off on them. And I'm like, yeah, but I mean, these are intelligent people. They know if something is consistent with their faith or not. Regardless of what kind of words they like to use. And of course, in the Confession of Dositheus, it just reflecting the people at the time. Does Father Patrick say he does not agree with the Orthodox Church of the 16? I think it's 1675 or 72.
72, And I have to laugh, Alan, because when I laugh because when Father Patrick literally presented me the thesis to me, and I read the thesis, I of course right away agreed upon him. And I find exact language that Father Ramsey tells me he's going to oppose right there in the Confession of Dositheus, which I believe it's Decree 18. People can find it online readily to read. And I'm looking at it and reading it and saying, this is going to be quite problematic. But I go a step further, Alan. As you know, I really do put a lot of time into my debates. I contacted a number of scholars and I asked them, well, how common is it for an Orthodox to deny a Pan-Orthodox council? And, the clear answer was it wouldn't be very wise. It shouldn't happen. But there is a problem we have, Alan, that really anything is open for debate within Orthodoxy. So that is a major issue that I see with Eastern Orthodoxy. Very near and dear friends we have there. I am not attacking them at all. I am looking at the system. we recognize they have a valid priesthood. Of course, they're an apostolic faith. But when you look, Alan, you talk about St. Maximus, they love him, rightly so. But when you've got St. Maximus the Confessor, who word by word is affirming the Catholic doctrine, and you're going to oppose it, you got a problem there. And in fact, an even bigger problem was I read the quote out, and Father Ramsey didn't want to affirm it until he knew who it was. Once he knew who it was, he tried to do mental gymnastics to read things into him, say, well, look, we believe the final H to mean this. I know what the Orthodox mean. Show me where Maximus believes that. And he, of course, unable to do that.
Well, that's kind of a thing I like to, I'm thinking of, I've kind of thought, like, I've collected, you know, that if you talk about the filioque with an Orthodox apologist, it's kind of like pretty much there are church fathers who talk about the filioque.
Yeah.
And if you say, well, how about this quote from Pope Leo the Great where it says, oh, it's economic. What about that? It's economic. So, I've collected a ton of patristic filioque quotes, and I've collected a ton of medieval post-schism filioque quotes. And like, I want to have someone on representing their position. I'm going to shuffle them, and I'm going to read them. Is this a good or a bad filioque?
And I wonder if they're going to want to affirm it. I wonder if they'll affirm it, Alan.
Because like the church fathers had the good filioque.
Mm-hmm.
The medieval Catholics had the bad filioque.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you think the medieval Catholics got their filioque? The Latin fathers, you know.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's any context. I think I've thought of having a certain Catholic on my channel and trying to do a game, you
like
know,
a devil's advocate.
Yeah. So I mean, but yeah, it's not so much to do with the content of the quote; it's who said the quote. If it's Saint Isidore of Seville, I have a filioque. I got a couple filioque quotes from him actually. It's like, oh, it's a good filioque. If it's Saint Bernard of Clairvaux, oh, it's a bad filioque. Why? Because of the person who said it, not the content saying it. That's essentially what it's become, because Photius did not make that argument.
Right.
That comes after Photius. That comes. You start to get it in the discussion between what's that guy's name, Anselm of Heidelberg and Nicetas and Nicomedia. You start to get an inkling of it then, and it comes to its full fruition at the Council of Blacarne. I know there's the letter to Marinus, but that's a whole other. That's a whole discussion in itself. So, but I'm trying to make a larger point. I don't want to go into that. If there's somebody who wants to take issue with that, just put it in the comments and we'll arrange some. But the point is, you should know if something is orthodox, and it's not like you just gave a 10-word thing. You gave a lengthy quote, and I don't think there's any shame. Like, I'm sure if you go through all the Catholic saints, you're going to find a few quotes where they don't believe in something that God defined centuries later. And that's not a problem.
Not at all. Had Father Ramsey read a quote to me from, let me give you an example, from Augustine, and perhaps I didn't fully agree with it, I'm not going to tell him, well, tell me who the author is first. I'm going to tell him, no, I don't agree with that portion. And if he then says, well, that's St. Augustine, I'll say, well, then Augustine clearly wasn't so clear here. Thank the good Lord we have a magisterium. Thank the good Lord we have a living, breathing, teaching authority. Within Catholicism, you can do and you can say that, but there is a hesitancy to go against figures like Maximus, Mark of it. But you know what? Even that, Alan, how many of these guys, I know Father Ramsey has, but how many of these guys out of Father Ramsey and maybe a few others have even read Mark of Ephesus? Now, I hear them spout off Maximus every now and then, but how many have read Mark? How many have read Palamas? How many have read Joseph Brenius and Nicholas Cabasilas? I bet you not even a handful of them. You've got these polemical attitudes online that you encounter that really try to draw a greater wedge between West and East and try to make it seem as if we're thousands of miles apart. Well, goodness, Alan, if with these kinds of polemics, it would seem that we are, but even on the issue of purgatory, as we read Mark of Ephesus, we should not be so far apart, so divided. And I dare say that if we are, then the issue is, as it continues to be, the Orthodox continue to move further and further away from the faith of their fathers, and that is an unfortunate thing.
Yeah, and I think that, like for a lot of people, especially certain converts from Protestant backgrounds, like they have a lot of misconceptions. Like for example, I heard a Protestant say once, "Oh, the Catholic Church used to condemn Palamas as a heretic. Now they think he's a saint." And I'm like, find me the quote from a pope where he's condemned as a heretic.
You're not gonna find
it. He is, isn't he? It's like, no, you've been listening to Jay Dyer.
Yep.
And Jay Dyer has said this without backing it up.
Yeah. Without a doubt. You're going to hear a lot of silliness coming over there from that camp. I never watch the videos that they put forth. Every now and then a little clip
I don't watch them anymore either.
I don't at all. Every now and then a little clip will arrive at my doorstep, and I'll turn it on, and I unsurprisingly have not been let down. It's always garbage every time I ever see it, especially the argument that, the one clip that always does arrive at my doorstep is the argument that Dyer tries to make to try and prove this is where the canon was settled for us. The guy has no idea what the canon of Scripture is, has no idea any apologetic material in the canon, but people will hear him. They look at the positivity at which he approaches the subject and say, well, this guy he's got an aura around him of positivity. He must be right. But then you do your homework and you realize the guy doesn't know what he's talking about.
Yeah, and I think, I think specifically for him, he'll just hold up a book and say, "Oh yeah, so-and-so," it's a Scott Hahn book, but not trying to, but he'll say, "Oh yeah, read Palamas. He says this, and that." Is
that the new book from Hahn? That does look like the new book.
It's from 2017.
My bad. Okay.
That
is okay. Yeah, no, that is not a new one. I thought that was his new book. I know his new book just came out. Not read it yet. I have it on my shelf, but I have not read it. Not gotten around to reading it yet.
Yeah, no, that's but still, very good book. Very good book. If you've ever read this one,
I sure have. Yes, I have. And Scott's a dear friend of mine, and near and dear friend of mine. He'd probably throw a rock at my head if I said I hadn't read it. I had definitely read it, and I look forward to meeting up with Scott when I'm over there in the area. I'm going to be live over there in studio with Pints of Aquinas in December, so that'll be a whole lot of fun.
Wow. Yeah, no. Oh man, that'd be nice. So there's actually someone from my church who, like I'm in Canada. There's someone in my church here in Canada who grew up on the same street as Scott Hahn. I'm not going to say the name here, but so knows the family okay, we're kind of drifting off topic here. But getting back to the debate, so I thought it was pretty much already won by the end of the cross-examination, because you had put forward firm thesis. You went deep into 1 Corinthians 3, which he didn't spend any time on in the opening statement. You went deep into 2 Maccabees. Which he didn't. He didn't spend any time on. I was shocked because he had to have known that these things are going to come up in the debate. They're very important verses. Part of the debate, if they prove purgatory or if they don't prove purgatory, right? They're the key verses that are going to come up. Just got back from Matt Walsh's rally to end child mutilation. Don't forget, Canada doesn't exist. We don't really. Not anymore, anyway. Matt Walsh, I love that guy, but So yeah, so like I kind of thought he didn't spend a good amount of time going into the key verses and like
Yeah.
exegeting them in the Greek and explaining what they mean. And then it came time for the cross-examination. And he's like, well, I don't think it means that. Well, then why didn't you tell us what you think it means when you had 15 minutes of opening statement? And
Yeah.
these are going to get brought up. He knows these statements are going to get brought up.
They were battleground texts at Florence. They clearly were going to get brought up, and they did get brought up. You should have known that. I was hoping, Alan, for a little better engagement, even on Second Maccabees. I was hoping we'd be able to go into that because Second Maccabees, the suffering aspect that is being undergone by the soldiers is at best implied in the text, but even if it's implied, I think it's strong implication as you look in the Greek of the text where it says that they will that the hope is that they will be loosed or delivered from their sin. You look at how that Greek word is utilized elsewhere from the very same author. I think we can make a very good case. He's talking about punishment there. I was hoping we'd go into that because Father Ramsey he's very astute when it comes to the Greek, but he didn't want to touch upon that text, and I was hoping he would, because I am aware of the way the early, not a whole lot, but a few early church fathers interpreted Second Maccabees, but he didn't touch upon that. So I was hoping really that we would be able to touch upon 1 Corinthians 3, or he would offer, a little bit of pushback. I thought he was going to take the Protestant approach, as he did in the opening statement, of arguing that the works go through the fire and not the man, which, again, that's never been a tenable argument. You get that from guys like Calvin,
Michael Brown.
Yeah, who are snapping it from them, and it doesn't work. It really doesn't work because the man goes through the fire. The works are utilized as a metaphor for the gold, silver, precious stones are in reference to the works of the man. Wood, hay, and straw are the bad works, which are sin. And then we read the man is the one that is either saved or, in verse 17, destroyed. Verse 15 is very clear. He is saved. How is he saved? Diaporos, through fire. So the man goes through the fire. It's very clear. You cannot separate the man from the works. And I think it becomes nonsensical if you try and do that.
You said in your debate with Father Patrick, and it came up in your debate with Dr. Brown as well, that each time the Septuagint or the Old Testament, which is obviously in the Septuagint, or I think the Hebrew text as well, says that if it uses the word paros, it's always in respect to the precious metals. Just explain that. I think I got it all, but
let me break it down. So here's the one area where at times in the past I've heard Catholics argue for 1 Corinthians 3, and they will argue for it in a purgatorial sense, which definitely they should. But then when they get pushback from a Protestant that may know the Greek or may have just Googled it, they'll say, well, what is the Greek word there? And the Catholic will reply, well, the Greek word is puros. It has to be purification. But that really is an assumption from a Catholic that might not know Greek. Because puros, even though it really does sound like it, you think of purification, puros, okay, puros must be purification. It just means fire. It doesn't mean purification all the time. So you've got to develop and extrapolate the apologetic from 1 Corinthians 3. Okay, well, if puros does not always mean purification, well, why on earth does it mean it here? Don't tell me because it's very clear in the context, because I don't see it there. They may tell you that. So then you look at the Greek there, and you look at what is the Greek? It's diaporos, through fire. Every time diaporos is coupled with precious metals, which it is right there in 1 Corinthians 3, every time in the Bible, the Greek Bible, it is always in reference to a purification, all the time. And here, well, who's being purified? The man is being purified. It's very clearly purgatorial. This work has been done by multiple scholars where they have noted you have precious metals connected with diaporos. A purification is being undergone here. In this case, the precious metals and the bad material are representative of how the man has, or mankind in general, has lived out their life, their lives. That is very clear from the text. So with that in mind, how can you escape the clear language of the purgatorial? You can't. Very clearly, purgatory is happening here. And another point I made, Alan, was whether you want to take the position that it's a particular judgment or the general judgment, I don't care what you want to take. It's post-mortem. It is in the afterlife, and that is something that must be dealt with.
And that is completely consistent with the quote you gave from Saint Maximus, which Father Patrick didn't really know what to do with. You said that scholars have made this connection before of dia puros and precious metals. Can you drop a couple names of the scholars?
Wish I could. One of them is Gibbs. I will get. You put me in the spot here. Let me see if I can pull up the others. I promise you. Yeah, you got me there. I promise. Where are the others? Goodness, I had. I wish I had my notes because I know one of the scholars is Gibbs. The other one, I'm unable to find it at the moment. I'll find it before we're done here. I hope. I'm trying to find it right now. Goodness, where is it? I know I have it in my notes for my debate that I had with Dr. Brown. Fortunately, I am having trouble pulling it up right now, but I got you one of them. His name is Giggs. That is the name of one of the scholars.
Giggs?
That is correct, yes.
Okay.
That's one of them.
So you said that the Old Testament, each time it uses them, can you name a verse, for example?
Yeah, and you know what? I think I found it already. Oh, did I not find it? I found notes where it says metals being purified. Man, okay, I think I did find it. Yeah, I got it. There we go. Okay, yes. I will name a bunch of them for you. So we've got Numbers 31:23 is one, and it says, everything that can withstand fire shall be clean, but whatever cannot go through fire shall be passed through water. Only the gold, silver, bronze, iron, tin, and lead, everything that can endure fire, you shall put through the fire, and it shall be clean, and it shall be purified. By the way, the dia puros is right there in verse 21. You have it right there in verse 21. Then verse 22, the precious metals. How do we know they're being purified? Verse 23 tells you. Here's another one, Zechariah 13. And this is incredible because it shows you the parallelism, the testing and the refining. And it says right here, and I will bring the 1/3 through the fire or into the fire, dia puros. I will refine them as silver is refined and test them as gold is tested. Psalm 65:10-12. For you, O God, have tested us. You have tried us as silver is tried and has gone through the fire, dia puros. So, and there are many more. I got a name of the other scholar. Here it is, Friar. So we have Friar. I was wrong. It's not Giggs, it's Griggs. Friar, Griggs, and Telford. And I know there are more, Alan. Unfortunately, I don't have all those other notes. I'd have to look for them. But there are multiple other texts. The point being, and by the way, those precious metals, the very same Greek words appear there in 1 Corinthians 3. And I think 1 Corinthians 3, I think Paul is clearly getting the language for the way the Temple of Solomon was built. It was ornate. It was beautiful, incredibly marvelous. So if you lived your life according to the beauty of God, the grace God has given you, you receive your reward, as 1 Corinthians 3 says. That is heaven. That is parallel to where St. Paul says you run the race and you get your crown in 1 Corinthians 9:27. But then what about if you've been factious and divided, as 1 Corinthians 3, the beginning tells you, where Paul is chastising them? Well, you're going to be punished, but you will be, as the Greek says, sophestatized, saved as well. But you're only going to be saved as going through fire. You're going to have to be purified. So I think everything, when we look at the very context of it, I think that's the reason why, Alan. The very first mention we have of 1 Corinthians 3 in a lengthy manner, we have it from Cyprian of Carthage, who is combining the Gospel of St. Matthew, that purgatorial prison. He calls it a carcel, purgatory prison, and he combines that with 1 Corinthians 3. He says they're going to be suffered and long purged by the fire. I think they very clearly are getting the language of 1 Corinthians 3. I think it's very clearly purgatorial.
Well, yeah, and like the thing you said about the precious metals, and just think, if you're a Christian in the Church of Corinth in the 50s, you get that letter. They probably have an Old Testament of that church, a Septuagint, where they can go and they've probably been reading it, because a lot of these are probably Gentile converts.
Yep.
And so they see those things that we see. Now, and like, I remember you brought this up to Dr. Brown, and he's kind of like, well, I'm not familiar with that, I'll have to check it out. He kind of just said, I don't know. You know, it's kind of shocking, because he's an Old Testament scholar.
No doubt. And I would look, Alan, a lot is made of the fact that, and you really only find it from people that are really, really mad that Dr. Brown did poorly in the debate. They will come out and they'll say, well, William, you try to change the parameters of the debate and make it a debate about the canon. No, I didn't. People don't know the fact that before I debated Dr. Brown, I went back to Dr. Brown's old archives to hear what Dr. Brown had to say about purgatory. And Dr. Brown very clearly realized that 2 Maccabees was a passage that we hearken to talk about purgatory. So you would really expect him to be ready to talk about 2 Maccabees. But he came up with all these phony things and said, well, you know what? We agree to stick to the Bible alone, to my canon, my shorter canon. Didn't say shorter, but the Protestant canon in essence. And that kind of agreement is nowhere to be found. It doesn't exist. And I will offer Dr. Brown $10,000 if you can ever produce a text or anywhere where I have made such an agreement. I will record a video of me eating my own socks if he can ever find that. He's never going to find them, because I would have never agreed, and I would never agree to such silly parameters of a debate. And it really, Alan, I think it gets to the heart of the issue. If you're afraid of dealing with the early church fathers and you don't want to deal with the very fathers that you like to use when you're defending the Trinity, you love to use them then, but you won't use them when it's a doctrine that you realize is specifically Catholic. Well, that tells me one thing, Alan. It tells me that Protestants are selective, and they only care about the early church when it matters to them. But any of these early fathers, Alan, would look at Dr. Brown, and they would not be so kind in judging his theology.
Yeah, that's true. And like, I was kind of shocked that Father Patrick didn't bring more fathers to the table. Like, he didn't bring anything to the table. I'm really shocked. Again, this is the poorest performance I've ever seen out of the guy. Mm-hmm. And like, I've seen him, he's done well. Like, he's done okay in some debates, but I think in this one, I don't know. Do you get the opinion in this debate that it's something he didn't want to debate? He wanted to debate something else, and you're
he wanted to debate it. No, without a doubt, he wanted to debate this topic. He was very excited to debate it. He prepared for it. He wrote out his opening statement. And I'll be very honest. I have before I debated him on the Immaculate Conception. Even before that, I've never heard any debates he's ever had. I've heard him. Obviously, I've done shows with him in Recent Theology where he will disagree with Catholic teaching. But as far as debating, I never heard any other debates of his. But I've heard people tell me he's done well in that debate. He's done very well in that debate. He really knocked out of the park in that debate. But the one thing and Father Ramsey knows it, and even before any debate begins, as Matt Fradd tells the audience, look, if it is my cross-examination, I'm going to be aggressive and I'm going to want to dominate the time because, hey, I'm the one asking the questions. Now, Father Ramsey has the right to do it in his too. If Father Ramsey wants to tell me, William, no more, he can do that. But obviously, if he's going to ask me a question, he's got to give me some time to answer it. I think he realized that I was dominating his time a little bit late into his cross-examination time. Now, is that a tactic of mine? It isn't a tactic of mine to make him look bad, but am I going to answer as long as I think I can or need to? I'm going to. If you stop me, I'm going to do what I did yesterday. I'm going to be respectful. But Father Ramsey made a mistake. He tried to pontificate with me. Instead, he tried to, at one point, if you watch a debate, he got a little bit animated and said, I don't care what scholar says what about Chrysostom. That's a contested text, and it doesn't refer to that. And I told him, I said, well, Father, once I get the time to reply to you, I'm going to reply to that.
I remember that.
And I did reply to that. I replied to that into another point because whether you want to call it contested or not, you cannot argue that Chrysostomos he's got a purgatorial teaching in there, and even in another homily of his and in another work of his that I was hoping we would get engagement from Alan. There's another work way harder to find, and people think that Chrysostom only talked about 1 Corinthians one time. He talked about it in multiple areas, and in another area, he's very clear when he connects it to Malachi 3, and he talks and says this is pretty much what's happening here is purification. When? On the day of judgment. There's really no way around that.
Hey, okay, we've got about 17 or 18 viewers. I want you guys to put in the chat a 1 if you've seen the debate in its entirety, 2 if you've seen part of the debate, or 3 you have not watched any of the debate now. I just want to know how much of my audience knows the debate. Are familiar with this debate. I've got a question for you, William. Who do you think is the best apologist against purgatory from either Protestant or Eastern Orthodox?
Now, when it comes to Protestantism, I'm going to have to, from what I have heard, I think that James White is probably given the best arguments. And the reason I'm going to say it, and they're going to be clear, I don't think they're good, but I think he did a real number on Father Peter Stravinskas. I don't think they were honest apologetics. He was not being honest about what happens in 1 Corinthians 3 when he's cross-examining Father Stravinskas, excuse me. He tries to argue that where it talks about the man going through the fire and being saved, he tried to argue with him that it was about hell there. And Father Peter didn't have the text in front of him. If Father Peter would have only looked and noticed where it says saved, it cannot be about hell. So when it comes to who I think has done the best, I'm going to say in debate, James White has done the best because he's caught his opponents off guard, but I don't think he presents a good case against purgatory.
Well, I think the best I've seen was an old debate you did against Turretin fan. Now,
I remember that, yes.
Yeah, because I think he probably, in my opinion, gave better arguments than White, and I don't think he was trying to be deceptive like White is or anything.
Yeah.
But I think he's focused on the scripture. He's trying to execute it. I don't know if Anthony Rogers has put any material out against purgatory.
I don't think he has. I to be honest, I really wouldn't know. I agree with you. I'm stopping. I think back, and I think that I do. I think that Turretin probably, and I'm trying to remember the debate. It was one of the last ones I think we did on healing outreach. I don't know. I want to say it was maybe 2017 or 2016. I don't remember. I think he tried to deal with it more robustly, but I think he came apart in the cross-examination ultimately because 1 Corinthians 3 is very clearly purgatorial. So I think that I don't think he did well in the cross-examination there, though. But I'm going to agree with you. And shockingly, another name comes up that I think did well would be Robert Zins, believe it or not. I heard him. I forgot what Catholic I heard him debating. I think he did pretty well there. I don't think any of them present a good case, but I think they've done well. And I don't think Turretin fan won that debate, I have to say. But I think he presented a better case than James White.
Okay, so we're about 50 minutes in. We're probably going to call it a day soon. So if you have any questions for William about purgatory, about the debate, or if you want, I'm sure he'd answer something else,
Yeah, anything.
now's your chance. Throw them in the chat and
Anything, even if it's a troll, anything. And because goodness, the trolls seem to love to come out on debate day. So anything really, anything anybody wants to ask, I won't mind tackling it. I would prefer it to be about the debate, though. That would be great, because I've been doing a lot of work on the debate. Now I'm going to be recording a video probably later where I'm going to really dig into the Eastern view of purgatory. I've already done a show with Father Deacon Dragani, but I'm going to go deeper into a show that I plan to record probably later tonight. So that'll be a lot of fun, but hopefully people have some questions.
Well, I don't see any questions yet. Well, okay. Well, there's a question here. I've got a question for you first. Well, there's kind of a second thing, and this has to go back to the confession of Dositheus. What is, like, I know the debate was not on this, but it's obviously a consequence. Like, what's authoritative for the Eastern Orthodox Church? Like, you got the 7, some people say 8 ecumenical councils, like the Palamite synods and 1 or 2 other synods, and then pretty much everything else is up for grabs, it seems. I don't mean to misrepresent you. If you're an Orthodox and you think wrong, feel free to put in the chat or in the comments. But like it seems that way. That's the impression I'm getting. Do you have anything to say about that, William?
You're right about that. But another thing very interesting is that you don't find it to be common for Orthodox to disagree with a pan-Orthodox council. And when you begin doing that, it really does open the door to many other issues. So, okay, well, is the issue of the canon still open for them? And clearly it seems like it is. Okay, well, where do we draw the line? And I think that within Orthodoxy, there really is just an imaginary line there, Alan. That to me is quite problematic. And I know the answer from Father Ramsey was, well, Confession of Dositheus was very Latin, if you will, very Catholic in responding. Of course it was, but do we then erase it from the history? That council was by and large an answer to Protestantism, so they had to adopt the blueprint already out there for them. And
those were not Latins at the council; they were Greek Orthodox bishops.
Exactly, they really were. They were Orthodox. It's a pan-Orthodox council. So that is problematic. And I know
it's not like we're talking about Florence here, right?
No, it's definitely not talking about Florence. And look, the one point that I made in the debate, and I make it over and over again, is that, look, if we've got figures like Mark of Ephesus, when we read him, Mark really does spend a lot of time attacking the purgatorial fire. And I want to be sympathetic to the Latins because they get a lot of heat. Well, you know what? They were really emphasizing the fiery language at the council. It became debated. Sure, they may have been emphasizing it, but for very good reason. Even a lot of Greek fathers emphasized it. St. Basil, St. Maximus the Confessor. It's in saints that we share in common. St. Cyprian, the great Augustine, who he's a saint for Orthodoxy. Depending what day of the week it is, whether they want to attack him on that day or whether they don't want to attack him, depending what kind of Orthodox you encounter, whether they want to beat up on their own saints or not, we share them in common, and they use that kind of language. So I'm sympathetic to the Latins because that language was used in a metaphorical manner. But we didn't need that language. It didn't become bound up with a dogma. But when you read Mark of Ephesus, what does he say? He says, well, in the afterlife, there is suffering, there is torment. The fear, he says, the fear and torment are greater than any kind of fire. Well, there you go. There is post-mortem suffering for your sins in the afterlife. Even he agrees with the Catholic model more than many modern-day Orthodox.
Okay, all right. So we got a ton of questions. Shall we get to them?
Let's do it.
All right. May I ask if there are any upcoming debates planned?
Definitely. God willing, we're down to 2 dates. We are working on them. We're going to hammer it out. I'll be debating Anthony Rogers on Sola Fide. We're between 2 dates right now. By the way, for the audience that may not know, because they have no idea what goes on, I had proposed after my debate in Pints with Aquinas yesterday in the evening to debate Anthony. I was going to debate Anthony right after debating Father Patrick. Don't mind doing marathon debates like that. But Anthony wants to debate with, he wants Marlon as his moderator. Marlon was very clear to me he could not do the debate yesterday evening. Fine. Marlon is a great guy. I look forward to working on a date that works for everybody. We'll get to that. After that, I have planned a debate. It will be hosted by Catholic Answers. I'm going to be debating Dr. Shabir Ali. And I will be debating on the Atheist Edge. I'm going to be debating against Matt Dillahunty. The topic
What's
being...
the topic for Shabir Ali?
It will be, is Christ the suffering servant, according to the Bible? That will be a very fun topic I look forward to. So I've got 3 more, God willing, before the year ends. And of course, once we get into the new year, many others, God willing, all with the grace of God.
All right, Mango Bango. How I assume he means how many?
Yeah.
How many passages in the New Testament do you think teach purgatory?
So we got 1 Corinthians 3 very clearly, and I think a good case can be made for Matthew. Now, the Gospel of St. Matthew, we can make a good case for, and I don't have my notes on it. Yes, I do. Matthew 5. I think Matthew 5, a good case can be made for the purgatorial prison as well. You can find multiple fathers that talk about that. So you have...
And that came up a lot in the debate with, not so much against Father Patrick, but against Dr. Brown.
That is correct. Yes, you've got multiple fathers that make the connection. Cyprian of Carthage, St. Jerome, the Gregory of Nyssa refers to it. Chromatius refers to it. So you do have multiple fathers that do catch that link there. Now, I do think it does need to be broken down and examined a bit there, but I think that clearly teaches it. But the clearest where you have the language of a post-mortem purification, 1 Corinthians 3 is there. But as I brought up, and here's the one thing I don't get, Alan. You know, I bring up in my opening statement Hebrews 12 and 1 Peter, and people then say, well, why is William bringing them up? Those don't talk about purgatory. I very clearly said in my opening statement, these are not about post-mortem suffering, but this shows you the theology of the Bible that 1, God as a loving Father chastises, and 2, God will refine and purify you. Once you lay those down as a foundational elements, you get to 1 Corinthians 3, and it shouldn't be a shocker because before that, I've shown the audience how God as a Father will punish and discipline his children. And so once you get to 1 Corinthians 3, it shouldn't be shocking language for people.
And there's also, perhaps you can comment, Matthew chapter 12, verses 32. It says, anyone who speaks a word against the Son of Man will be forgiven, but anyone who speaks against the Holy Spirit will not forgiven either in this age or in the age to come. It may sound like a stretch to some Protestants, but it's used by church fathers to mean purgatory.
Sure is.
I know James White says, it was not used until Pope Gregory the Great. That's a lie. St. Augustine used it.
He did.
Shows that James White does not know what he's talking about. So I mean, there's a few verses, and like, okay, a Protestant will say, "Oh well, that's not enough for me." Go challenge him to show the verses for the hypostatic union, and or that Christ has 2 wills. Protestants accept those. And then compare the proof. I'm not saying I don't believe in those. I'm Catholic. I have to believe in hypostatic and 2 wills. But I mean, just they put an impossible standard for what we believe, and for things that they accept, things we have in common. They're sure, Al, except that vague verse. That verse that's used by church fathers, completely legit. So, I mean, like, use equal standards. Here's what we're saying.
Without a doubt.
St. Dennis, do you have any upcoming debates? We kind of answered that. Barely Protestant, what are your thoughts on C.S. Lewis, The Great Divorce? Have you read that?
I have not read it. I apologize. But Barely Protestant, I don't have another debate until probably the end of November. If you recommend that I read it, and you think it's a very good book, because I have very limited time. You think it's a very good book, I will read it, and I will tell Alan my thoughts. And the next time I'm on the show, I will tell the audience my thoughts. If you think it's a very good book to read.
All right, you can put in the comments, Father James, if that's a very good book. Original Win Productions.
What is a woman?
What is a woman? But seriously, is there an argument? You say, okay. Do you want to take this one?
Yeah. So one argument that I hear very often is that it just makes sense that when you read about prayer for the dead in early church father. Now I'm going out of the Bible and I'm going to the early fathers, Original Win. In the Bible, it would probably be a whole other thing. But one that I hear very often is that, well, just reading prayer for the dead automatically means that this particular father is referring to purgatory. I encounter that a lot, Original Win, where people will quote prayer for the dead, but you got to go a little bit further there. Because you can have prayer for the dead, and I'm not arguing that very same father perhaps does affirm purgatory in another area. I think they pretty much almost always do, but don't assume that merely because you read a prayer for the dead that particular sermon in and of itself is going to be talking about purgatory. I find that often being done in quote bites on online websites. If there's one thing that I've learned through all of my years in preparing for debates, I do go online when I'm preparing for a debate, just to see what people are saying. And I'm just so blown away and shocked by so many terrible arguments, Alan. There's a lot of really bad arguments. And here's another thing. There are a lot of fake quotes out there. Make sure you track down to the original, because if you don't, and you're debating somebody that is a really good debater, in my opinion, I find Turretin, even though he's tamer, I find him to be a very good debater. Let me give you an example. He is good. Let me give you an example. When I debate Anthony Rogers, I'm not going to encounter any new patristic translation or something I haven't heard before. It'll be anything that's been covered, everything under the sun before. The guy has nothing new original. But when I debate Turretin, every now and then the guy finds a new quote that doesn't even exist in English that he's going to pop up on me, and it really does bring something new to the table. And for that, I appreciate my debates with him. I'll be debating him in the future as well. Multiple debates we have planned, and I do look forward to that.
Well, I've got a policy on quote mines. Mm-hmm. Don't use quote mines unless you've made the quote mine yourself from primary sources.
There you go.
That's my policy.
There you go, Alan, because that means you've looked at it, you've got it, you know where it is, and you know it's real. Unfortunately, that it really is not always the case, especially when some people just rely on online quotes, and I think that can be so problematic.
Yeah, and I see this all the time by people like online who are like so eager, and like look, I'm not going to challenge you unless you're harassing my fellow Catholics. I mean, if you think something proves something, just take your time. Do the research. If you don't know it, just don't try to use these quote mines. There's a lot of stuff I haven't read, and I don't try to say things that are like, for example, if I'm quoting from a secondary source, I will tell you I'm quoting from this scholar. But please take your time, because frankly, a lot of people, including a lot of Catholics. A lot of Catholics were as guilty as anyone else on this. A lot of us sound like idiots when we just throw out quotes that we haven't looked at the context.
No doubt. I 100% agree.
Yeah, it applies to all sides. And all right, from Mango Bango, how do you respond to Protestants who say purgatory adds to the sufficient work of Christ on the cross? Remember how there was a question that bad arguments for purgatory?
Yeah.
Well, this is the opposite. This is a bad argument against purgatory.
Yeah, it is a bad argument. It really is. And here is the reason why it's a bad argument, Mango. Let me, I'm going to unfold the theology behind it. The theology behind that says that ultimately we repent. We do some kind of repentance in the afterlife. But the Catholic theology and the tradition calls purgatory or purgatorial suffering Satispasia. What does that mean? That means it's passive suffering. We're not doing any kind of repentance. So what is repentance? Well, Mango, repentance is you changing your will. You don't change your will in the afterlife. Either you died in the friendship of God or you died outside of the friendship of God. If you died in the friendship of God, well, that means you lived a life and you accepted that grace and you grew in sanctifying grace. And the reason we can grow in sanctifying grace is because we have accepted the work of Christ on the cross and we have followed and lived the faith. That's the very reason why. And
Amen.
if people say purgatory is not part of the gospel, it's pretty good news if you know you're going to go to heaven. And you cannot lose your salvation in purgatory.
All right. Who is your favorite Protestant reformer? Well, for me, it's Henry VIII, hands down. It's got to be Henry VIII. Who is your favorite?
Mine is shocking. Francis Turretin would be my favorite.
Would you consider him a reformer, though? He's kind of late.
He's late. And the reason you know what? He's not one of the original ones, but I would consider him a reformer. The reason I pick him is not because of how Catholic he is at all, but I pick him because once you get to him, you really got Protestantism there. You really have it evolving. You really have the shedding of apostolicity, I like to say. He is much more anti-Catholic than Luther, if that's possible. Much more anti-Catholic than Calvin and some other figures. He really, you even see, even though he held to the perpetual virginity of Mary, you even see a very low and poor Mariology. So Protestantism really begins to come into picture once you get to a Francis Turretin. And the reason I also like his stuff is because it shows you a ton of arguments that began to get developed and arguments that were later developed by later Protestants that are being ripped off by people today that are bad arguments.
All right. May I ask who engaged who on the debate? In other words, did you ask to debate him, or was it the other way around? So whose idea was the debate? Was it yours or Father's?
Now, Desmond, I wish I could give you an answer to that. I don't remember, because when Father Ramsey and myself spoke, we talked about multiple debates. Even before we debated the first time on the Immaculate Conception, we talked about debating multiple times. I threw out a few topics. He threw out a few. I don't remember who threw this one out. I'd have to go back and I'd have to look. It's been a little bit of time. I don't know who suggested this particular topic. But I know that the Immaculate Conception, that was suggested by myself. And we agreed to debate, and we had, in fact, this was planned a while back on Pints of Aquinas. And of course, they make the artwork and they advertise just a little bit before debate time, but we had agreed upon it many months ago.
All right. Very important question coming up from Father James. What is your favorite Star Wars old canon novel? Not the new canon, that's off limits, only the old canon.
I'm going to really disappoint you and tell you I don't know anything about the novels. I have been very disappointed about the new films that have come out, and I've just completely lost track. After the last one, I'm just so very disappointed with Star Wars that I really need to step back a little bit, and I don't know when I'll get back to that world.
And since we're on the topic of Star Wars, Father James, I want you to put in the comments if you've seen Andor. I've been meaning to watch.
I was thinking, Alan, I was thinking of returning to that world with Andor because I like the actor and people have told me good things about it. But I got to be honest, Alan, I'm an old guy. I may look younger than I am. I'm an old guy, and I do not like the way they treated the classic characters. I'm sorry, I just don't like it.
Yeah, that's absolutely criminal. When's Eric's papacy book coming? I think you probably should ask Eric about that.
Yeah, you really should ask Eric.
You know?
I will. I don't know. You'd have to ask Eric, but I mean, I can tell you, I can get you jealous and tell you that I read it over a year ago. I did read it over a year ago. We all read it over at R&T. We looked at it. We told them what we thought about it. I can tell you right now, it's a fantastic book, but I do not know when that book will be out. But hey, contact Eric. Eric is awesome. He'll reply to you right away.
Yeah, and I think this book, I've not read this book. it's a long book, right? It's like 800 pages.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. What is the topic with the Dillahunty debate? Interested to see that one.
The topic is Mariology reasonable?
Pretty odd to debate with Dillahunty.
Yeah, well, Dillahunty did a whole video arguing that Mariology was not reasonable. He did a whole video trashing Mariology, and he approached it from an incredibly Protestant perspective. I found out about it. People got in touch with me, and then people reached out to me and asked me if I'd be willing to debate him on the topic. Then I talked to him, the guy that used to run the Atheist Edge, and I found out that I believe he sold it to somebody else. Somebody else took over. That guy got in touch with me, said, would you debate it if I could set it up with Matt Dillahunty? And I said, I don't think Matt will debate me. We had a little bit of a run-in not long back, but I will do it. I'll debate it. He was able to make it work.
In person?
Not in person. He does live near me, though.
Yeah, because I'm like, wait, he's from that area. You're like,
yeah, no, we had a run-in online with a show that I had done. He came on and he cursed me out, and I wanted to travel to where he was at and debate him, but he declined. So I'm shocked that this guy was able to put it together. But hey, I'm looking forward to
it. William, do you get the impression that Father Ramsey does not believe in mortal sin, but believes all sin is equal?
I do. I got that impression, McVine, and I think once I brought that out, I think he didn't want to touch upon that because very clearly, scripturally, there is a very clear distinction between mortal and venial sins. And I think once I offered pushback on that, he didn't want to deal with it. But I got that impression, McVine, and that will come out because I'm going to be doing multiple more shows with Father Ramsey. We have agreed to do a show on universalism where it's going to be a round table panel where a bunch of people will be on the panel. And I'm going to do it. People have really been clamoring and really been wanting me to debate them on original sin. So we're going to try and work that out. And I don't know who will host that. Maybe Pints or I don't know, maybe R&T. Who knows, but many more things down the pipeline, God willing.
All right. It's an amazing book. Second best Toy. Okay, that's not a question. He just saying it's.
I'll check it out.
It sounds like it's a good book. I'm very underread on C.S. Lewis. I've read The Four Loves. I've read the Narnia Space Trilogy. I've read that, but
yeah,
I like apart from that, I'm somewhat underread. I've got to God in the Dock just on my shelf there. I got to read that one. But all right, no, thank you. Oh, here's a question. Do you think Luke 12:48 to 41 to 48 is a strong proof for purgatory? I've never heard you bring this passage up before. Oh, that's a good question.
Yeah, I do. That is the one about the servant that will punish. Actually, the master will punish the servant. I think that is a good one. The reason I haven't brought that one up a lot before, Mango, is very clearly because debates are very limited. So in a debate, what I tend to stick to are the passages from the Bible where I have the most amount of early church fathers that I can use that exegete a passage a certain way. And I try to stick to those the most because think about it. I've got 20 minutes and at the most, sometimes I can only get 3 to 4 questions through in those 20 minutes. If I utilize this one, I might then get pushback and somebody will say, well, give me the patristic evidence backing it. And at times there is not a whole lot. So I like to stick to the arguments that I know are going to give me a meaty amount of information.
Okay. Would you debate Father Patrick again? It sounds like you've got a few debates lined up.
Yeah, I would. Yeah, I've got no problem with it. We get along even after the debate where people may have thought that we really got a little bit heated there. We talked even after the debate. Yeah, I would debate him again. I'm going to be doing multiple more shows with him. So yeah, we get along well. We do plan to do more. God willing in the future. Who knows? Maybe even a papacy debate. That could be something that we visit. So.
Oh, interesting. No, I think that's if I asked him if he had seen Andor. Kenobi is good. Oh, he's talking about the book. That's interesting. I quickly want to say something like this. I'll take 30 seconds. There's a guy who talks about sci-fi books named Jonathan Cohn, Koan. He's got a channel on YouTube, and he says that's his favorite old canon book, and he's read them all. So I mean, it's impressive. If Cohn thinks it's good, I've heard very good things about the Kenobi book. Star Wars Episodes 1's the greatest. Yeah, you can believe that if you want. There's books available for pre-order at the St. Paul Center. Dillahunty, Francis Turton, the argument. Looks like we're out of questions. All right. Have you got any final words? Then we'll call the night. It's about the time you wanted.
Alan, so. I had a great time with you. We will be back. For people know, I still got to finish the canon. I want to talk about Romans 3. We'll be back another day. Great time talking with you, Alan. Thank you for having me on. I am going to be doing more shows that are debate reviews on this particular debate I had, but I'm thrilled that I was able to do the first one with you. Alan, had a great time. You're doing incredible work here, brother. I want to encourage you by telling you that you are incredible. Keep doing the great work you're doing, brother.
Thank you so much. And thank you for coming on, and we'll certainly collab again. I've actually got an idea of something I could collab on, but
we will do it.
I'll tell you later, but we're signing off for now. Everyone, it's Friday evening. Have a great, great weekend. Go to church, pray the rosary, all that stuff. And
don't forget to go to Mass.
Don't forget to go to Mass on Sunday. And God bless.
God bless you.